present and to join in conversation here. Today is going to be an interactive conversation for our session titled Mapping Change, Finding Our Place in the Journey Towards Climate Justice. I'm joined here today with Eleanor. I'm going to pass it over to her to provide a bit of an introduction, and we'll get our session started.
Thank you so much, Mia. So, like she said, I'm Eleanor. I'm from Climate Education Reform BC. So we're based in BC, Canada. So we're
Please, you're a little bit audible. I'm not getting you.
Sorry? Am I here? Can you hear me all right?
Yes, Eleanor, you can continue.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, we're a student-led movement advocating for climate change, consistent climate change education in British Columbia in Canada. So we were started by 3 high school students who noticed the lack of consistent attention to climate change that it was received in schools. Our overall vision is to see the effective implementation of climate justice education that fully addresses the root causes of why the climate crisis exists and that fully prepares students to engage in a community-based climate solutions. So with that, I'll pass it back over to Mia to introduce herself and her organization as well.
Thank you so much. So my name is Mia George, and I'm a strategist with over a decade of public sector experience, spanning project management, communications, and strategic planning. I host the Futures Hub podcast, and I actually found Foresight probably 5 years or so ago, where I found it at the intersection of my passion for learning, public service, and innovation. So my personal goal is to democratize futures work by integrating personal and community futuring to empower individuals and enhance collective well-being. Particularly interested in systems work. So understanding that systems are a set of interconnected parts that work together. So think about the food system or the healthcare system, or today we're going to be talking about the climate justice system. These systems aren't individual pieces, they're networks of relationships and policies, institutions and people, and they all influence each other in ways that shape everyday lives. So really, our focus of today is to understand the climate justice system a little bit better and how we can position ourselves in this conversation. Before we get started, we have a Menti here. So for those of you who have not used Mentimeter before, we encourage you to go to menti.com, and I'm going to drop the link in the chat to really just get some of the feedback and perspective on your familiarity and sorry, I'm just joining this piece here on your familiarity with the climate justice system and with strategic foresight. So we can have a baseline just in terms of how everyone is feeling today and what your thoughts are here. So I'm just going to be switching my screen.
Amazing. If one of you, Mia or Eleanor, can also pop the Mentimeter link in the chat box in case folks can't use their phones or scan.
Yes, absolutely. I've popped it in there. Were you able to see it?
Perfect.
I think
yep.
I'll pop it in again.
Got it. Thank you.
So you have the option of clicking through on the link, scanning the QR code, or you could also go to menti.com and type in the code if you wish. The first question is on a scale of 1 to 4, with 4 being very familiar and 1 being not at all. How familiar are you with the concept of strategic foresight? So I see there's 1 vote that's come in. If you're having trouble with the Menti as well, please feel free to drop your answer in the chat. Wonderful. So it looks like we have a bit of a spectrum coming through here. All right, we have slightly here, yep. We'll give it just another 30 seconds here. Wonderful. So today we will be talking about strategic foresight as well. Understanding, of course, this is part of World Futures Day, but there's such a broad spectrum of understanding about futures, futurism, and what strategic foresight might be or what it can do for us. Wonderful. So the next question, I'm just forwarding the Menti here. The next question is on a scale of 1 to 4, with 4 being very informed and 1 being not informed, not at all, how informed are you about the climate justice space? So we recognize that there's many different ways that you could have potentially stumbled upon our conversation, whether you're coming at it with a foresight lens, whether you're coming at it with a climate justice lens. So we'll give it a minute or so for answers to come in here. And again, the chat is always available and open if needed. All right, we have Linda slightly as well. Familiar with climate change, climate justice, not as much. We have some experts here, those who are actively working in this space. That's wonderful. All right, excellent. So it's really nice to see that, of course, there is that spectrum here. There's some who are very familiar, some who are still getting used to it, still getting their feet wet. So what we're going to do is we'll share a little bit about both of these spaces, actually. And I'm just going to toggle back to our presentation here. And I will pass it over back to Eleanor, who will explain a little bit about that climate justice system in space.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mia. So I just want to talk a little bit about the climate justice system that we're going to be talking about today in our session. So specifically, when we talk about climate justice, we're looking at the impact of climate change on humanity and or specifically human rights. So that is to say, how does climate change disproportionately affect marginalized or racialized groups? So one thing to consider are the different actors that can affect it, such as the UN, which is or the UNFCCC, which is the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, or large corporations, individuals, NGOs, or student initiatives. So it's the understanding that vulnerable populations feel the effect of climate change more prominently, such as those in developing countries. So other facets of climate justice include structural inequalities, which means race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic inequalities, and intergenerational inequity. So meaning that the young generation inheriting this earth along with all of the climate change problems that come with it. So kind of why we want to focus on this and what we kind of mean in this is that CRBC is based in Canada. So our focus is very much on holistic and intersectional climate education, meaning including various voices, including indigenous voices in the advocacy for curricular climate education in order to kind of address this inequality. So climate justice is the advocacy for those voices to be heard, particularly in conversations about policies and actions that can determine their quality of life. So from corporate accountability to legal frameworks to indigenous rights, the climate justice system aims to address the inequality that climate change policy, the effects of it, policies can have. I'll pass it back over to Mia to talk a little bit about the Foresight tools that we'll be using today in our session.
Wonderful. So the space we'll be talking about is the climate justice space. And what we're going to be applying the lens of is the strategic foresight lens. So recognizing that there may be some here who are just beginning to hear about foresight, there's others who might be working with it regularly, just setting that baseline to say that strategic foresight is a way to think about what might happen in the future and a way to make smart decisions today to be ready for it. So we have a definition on the slide here, which is from the OECD, which is really that it's a structured approach to explore plausible futures and to anticipate and better prepare for change. So think of this as think of it like a game of chess. When you're playing chess, you don't just think about the next move. Hopefully, you're thinking several moves ahead. So strategic foresight helps you to do that in real life by considering different possible futures and preparing for them. And there are strategic foresight tools that help people think creatively about the future so they can make those smarter choices today to support them in creating the roadmap for the future they want, so that you're not caught off guard by surprises. You're prepared for the possibilities. For today's session, we are going to be focusing on a strategic foresight tool called the Actors Map. And the actors map is a tool that helps us visualize the different people, groups, or institutions that influence or are influenced by a specific issue, organization, or change. Ultimately, this is a stakeholder analysis tool, and it's great to use when trying to understand a system. This is one of many Foresight tools. So I learned about this tool during my program at OCAD University for Strategic Foresight and Innovation, using the textbook Design Journeys Through Complex Systems by Peter Jones. This book is based on the graphical, or the actors map in the book is based on the graphic model to visualize conflicts by Simon Fisher. So to understand the actors map, and we're all going to get into an actors map all together, this is an interactive session, but just to describe it a little bit before we start to get our feet wet. In the context of an actors map, an actor is any individual, group, organization, or institution that plays a role in shaping, influencing, or being affected by a particular issue, system, or community. Actors have different degrees of power, which is the ability to influence decisions, policies, or resources, and knowledge. So expertise or lived experience or awareness. So on the actors map, we map actors on the axis of knowledge, with those who have more knowledge or understanding about an issue or system going over to the right side of the map, and power. So those who have greater influence going upwards. We also map the system based on these circles, in which you can map them on an individual level at the center, all the way outwards towards where they are in society, for example, so societal levels. It recognizes that individuals have a certain scope of control, but you start to have more and more control when you're working at broader levels or broader groups. So ultimately, what you'll see is that this creates 4 quadrants where actors can be placed. This top right section is where people or organizations are that have high power and high knowledge. Top left, they have high power, but low knowledge. So perhaps they don't have the lived experience, they don't have that understanding, but they have a lot of influence. The bottom right is low power, so not a lot of influence, but they have a lot of knowledge. So maybe they have lived experience, but they're not able to enact change in the system. And finally, we have the bottom left quadrant, which is a low power and low knowledge. So perhaps they are disconnected. They have little access to information. They don't have a lot of access to decision making. So this map and this tool helps us see not just who is involved, but also how they interact with the system. Who holds authority, who holds expertise, and where gaps are, and where engagement might need to exist. So the first thing you do with this map is you start to plot key actors. You think about the different people and organizations or institutions that impact or are impacted by this issue, and you place them on the map. After that, you can start considering relationships. So from here, we'd like to invite you all to join us in creating an actors map for the climate justice space. And I'm going to be going in here and sharing a link with you in the chat to our Miro board, which is a virtual whiteboard tool. So I'm going to share this link with our group. So anyone with the link can edit it. I'm going to copy the board link. I'm going to share it in our chat. So what you can do to join us in this board for this collaborative space is you click on this link, and the password is WFD presentation, all lowercase. So I'm just typing that in the chat as well so that you can access this board. And you can join us all here. I'll call everyone together with us so that we can play together on this actors map. And as we get in, just to preface this by saying it is not a science. Actors mapping is not a science. It is a conversation. It is a tool for discussion. So Eleanor is going to lead us through some prompts to help us think about who to start plotting on our map, or which organizations we can start plotting on our map. But we'll just give it a little bit of time so people can join us in this space. And if you have any issues joining, please do let us know, and then we can help troubleshoot it with you.
Yeah, thank you, Mia. Yeah, so as a way for everybody to kind of get on the Miro, I just want to give a kind of brief overview of why we're, or rather the understandings and the impact of using this tool and learning how to use it. So alongside the overarching understandings of climate justice, like I mentioned before, climate education also aims to help us understand the roots of the climate crisis and empower us to find the solutions. So also, but beyond that, having a strong community, especially feeling it on a global level, that collaborates together and incorporates different voices and perspectives is essential in conversations about climate justice and understanding it. So today, like Nia said, we'll be discussing the different actors within the climate justice system by working on this actors map together. I'll let you guys get on the Mira that Mia dropped into the chat. Again, yeah, let us know if you have any problems, but I do see you guys on the map. Can you guys find it all right? Okay.
I think we have a few people here. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah. So it'll be in the left corner if you're on the Miro but can't quite find the slide we're on. Yes. I think it's highlighted now. Review Mia. Right. So one way to get thinking
আমি
is
নামার পরেই বসছি পড়তে হুজুর আসেনি তো স্কুল
Sorry, Mahir, I think you might have been unmuted and we're getting a little bit of feedback here.
okay. Yeah, so I'm just gonna kind of go over overview of how it works with our collaborative space on Miro. So on the left, you'll see that there's a sticky note option. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna grab a sticky note and put any actor, an actor of that you think that's within the climate justice system. So that could be like a user, an NGO, the government, or any as an actor that you think affects and has an impact within the climate justice system, and you're going to place it on the actors map based on the spectrum of what Mia said earlier of knowledge and power. It's also worth considering where they fall within the rings of circle, and which if you might not be able to see right now when you're not in the Miro, it's user, organization, ecosystem, and society. Also, feel free if you are not able to get on the Miro, feel free to discuss in the chat or to kind of raise your hand and we can discuss about we can put it on the board as well if you're not able to access the Miro board. So one way to get thinking is kind of think of the different groups or buckets of actors. So looking at that spectrum again of knowledge and power. So we can also think about their level of impact. Like I said, individuals in the climate justice system, NGOs, nonprofits. So one thing that I think of when I think of the climate justice system is I would consider the United Nations, the UN. So if you could grab a UN sticker for me. Yeah, I think because based on where they are in the climate justice system and because they have that specific committee that is for climate justice, like the UNFCCC, I would put it with relatively high knowledge because they have that specified knowledge within that committee. And as well, since they also have an international stage, then they might be a little bit higher on the power spectrum as well. So with that, I will be giving you guys about 7 minutes, so ending at the 30 mark, or yeah, 7 minutes because we're global. I wouldn't say the time exactly, but yes, 7-ish minutes to kind of populate this board, and we can come back to discuss it, debrief it, and look at what we all think. We do a little bit of prompting here and there, but otherwise, I hope you guys enjoy the activity while we run through it.
And remember, don't be shy. It's not a science. There's no right or wrong answers. It's a conversation tool. The first sticky note is the hardest usually. Josephina, that comment about national government is wonderful. It begs the question as well, are there other levels or layers of government that could potentially provide impact in this space or belong to this space?
Something I think we could consider would be, are there people or specific people in the government or relate to the government that might also have a hand in the climate justice system? Yeah, we'll let you guys keep working on it for a little while, and then we can come back to kind of debrief and discuss it.
And Linda, I see your comment about West Shore Fact. That's wonderful, considering specific organizations where they could have an impact. So adding it to the board, and if you think that there's a specific quadrant where they should go, just let us know and we can place them accordingly.
Okay. It looks like we got time for, at least, yeah, time for this activity. But since, yeah, you guys did so good. I see a lot of cool organizations. I see the government as well as the UNICEF, Teaching the Future, and Greenpeace. Yeah, it's always, again, like we emphasized earlier, is like the actors map isn't a science. It's a discussion, and we're always gonna have different perspectives and different ideas of where things can go. So we're just gonna kind of give you guys some more actors to think about that me and I were thinking about when we were planning this activity. Uh, yeah. So one actor that I might think about are we can kind of discuss where you guys might place it, or feel free to just move it on the board. So one um actor that I might think about when I think about the climate justice system are researchers. So researchers specific in the climate justice field. So that is to say, people who specialize either in climate justice or climate change in general. So I've put a researcher's sticky. Does anybody have either in the chat or just raising your hand in the Zoom meeting and any opinions on where researchers might fall in terms of the spectrum between power and knowledge? Yeah. Mia, do you have any thoughts on where it might fall?
I think that researchers in this space would be quite knowledgeable, but I'm not sure where their power might lie. So recognizing that they could be affiliated with organizations. Perhaps they're in these inner rings, but again, maybe not as high on a power axis, unless depending on which organization they're from.
Yeah, definitely. So it depends on, I guess, the context that the researchers are in, whether they're part of, for instance, like a university or just like another nonprofit organization. So that'll definitely impact their level of power that they might have within the climate justice system. So personally, I might think that within the climate justice lens, they might have maybe a little bit higher power, maybe not as much as city governments or national governments, but there is a fair amount in terms of when we're looking at climate justice. Yeah, I also see that me we're putting in a few as well, so we can look at that. Grassroots activities and groups, one of them being CRBC actually, which is the organization I'm from, if we missed the introduction, as well as like the local coalition of organizations and the city government. Yeah, another actor that I might think of, it might not be as intuitive when we think about climate justice system, but they are an actor in which meaning that they do have an impact in how we understand it or kind of what we see in it, which is a lot of private companies, because that they can have that influence and power within, for instance, the government, which does have power. They can kind of influence which way climate change policies go and how we understand climate change, how we understand the climate justice system. So, yeah, Mia, do you have any suggestions for a company that you might think has a large power base, but maybe not as much knowledge?
That is a wonderful question. And my familiarity with the climate justice space is not as broad as yours, Eleanor's. I'm not sure the specific names of companies, perhaps, but I do appreciate the specific company or organization names that were shared with the group. I think there was, for example, West Shore Fact was a specific company mentioned. I think someone has dropped in here Greenpeace, World Wildlife Foundation, some very interesting suggestions from a climate justice lens. I think Linda here said Monsanto.
Linda, do you have any suggestions on where to place it, or whether it be like, well, the one way we can also look at it when we have sort of already stickies within the actors map is kind of relative to other actors already within it. So do they have more or more or less knowledge than university students, whether they have more or less influence than companies? Yeah, so let me know if you have any thoughts on where to put Monsanto. I just looked up, which is an it's an American agrochemical company, which is so cool. Yeah, agricultural biotechnology, which is so important, especially for food resources, and which is also a big part of the climate justice. They have knowledge, their power is greater than their knowledge. Okay. Again, so we have knowledge and power is greater than their knowledge.
So that's good to keep in mind because of the quadrants. So if they have power, they would be up in the top half. But if they have less knowledge, then that would bring them over to the left side of the circle. So they would be on that top left quadrant then.
Yeah. So maybe somewhere, would you say somewhere here?
Yeah, it could be. I think also just recognizing that if they have less knowledge, they would be further down on this x-axis here.
I also see someone dropped the role of the church in here. I would love to hear where you think it might be placed in terms of okay, well, yeah, thank you, Maya. Yeah, in terms of where the quadrants fall as well. Let me know if let me know if you have any thoughts. We'll be happy to move it around the Miro board. But yeah, that's a very cool company to talk about. I hope, yeah, Monsanto, we're putting the left quadrant again, meaning that their power might be a little bit higher than their knowledge. Yeah. Another actor that I might think about, especially because I'm still a student within the climate justice, is because I think of climate education a lot, and that's what I focus on, is the school board. So what I kind of mean by school board is the people that kind of determine what kind of education curriculum that's given to students. So why I think that's important is that what we're exposed to and the education we're exposed to can determine the values, beliefs, and attitudes we hold towards certain topics. So how we present them, how we view them, and how we teach them can impact what we choose to focus on later, in whether that be in our career or just overall in our interests. So personally, I place school board maybe around the left quadrant. But Mia, do you have any thoughts on where the school board might lie?
Well, I think that's a good question. And the questions that you're posing, Eleanor, speak to the discussions that can happen with the actors map. Even Alatia, your question about church. The whole idea that this becomes a conversation, and depending on the space that you're operating from, they could potentially belong in different quadrants. And part of the benefit of a tool such as this is articulating what those relationships are, or considering what their impacts are, or why they might be placed in certain quadrants for some individuals versus the others. Josephina, you had a question here about if specific events can be considered. And I think this actually goes to the next step that would happen with the actors map. And it's not necessarily something that we would have time to do with this map in front of us right now. But the next step generally with an actors map is, once you have the map and you've taken a look at it and you've had those discussions, you would start mapping, for example, relationships between actors. So an event such as interest rate cuts or increases. Which actor would trigger such an interest rate cut or increase? For example, we're based out of Canada, Eleanor and I, that would be influenced by the Bank of Canada. What would the relationship of that event be on other actors on the board? How does it affect school boards? How does it affect students and educators? And starting to map those relationships accordingly. So that's a second layer that could be applied to the actors map at that point.
For sure. And kind of expanding on that, if you also mean specific events by, like, for instance, specific events within the climate justice lens, so meaning like climate strikes or movements, one we could also be to generalize that bigger to kind of understand where it might fall. So that could be like in general student initiatives, or kind of like, yeah, kind of strikes or movements that kind of generalize and kind of incorporate an umbrella those kinds of specific events. Yeah.
So I wonder at this point, recognizing the time, I wonder if we could take a pause here even and give you the opportunity, as you have an actors map such as this. One of the things that we're very curious about is about the personal connection to the space. And that's important as well for young people to understand their positionality in a space, to understand the players in a space, and the areas where they could have influence, or the individuals that they might need to speak to. So looking at this space, and if you're in the board, that's perfect. If not, feel free to drop it into the chat. But consider your role. If you're thinking about yourself in the climate justice space, where would you place yourself on this map? Where do you fit in terms of power and knowledge? And how would this role shape how you interact with others in the system? So this is something that perhaps you can answer. If you want to keep it private, by all means. Otherwise, another feature of Mentimeter is the option of using emojis. On the left-hand side, there's the plus sign to click for tools, media, and integrations, and you could just do a search there for emoji. So I'm just showing it on my screen share to show. It pops up a bunch of fun different emojis. And let's say choose whichever one and feel free to place where you might belong. This little smiley face is me. I recognize as an individual. I'm in this inner circle as a user or an individual. I don't have as much knowledge as Eleanor, so I don't know where Eleanor is going to place her sticky, but I'm definitely going to be a little bit lower on the knowledge access there in comparison to her. I'll be her friend. So where would you place yourself on the board?
Thank you, Mia. That was very touching. Yeah, I think one thing to also consider is that our impact or our role in the climate justice system, both as individuals and as the other parts of our life. So, for instance, where I am as a person myself, as someone interested in the climate justice system, but also as someone as a student or someone as part of a climate education organization. So how would my power or knowledge kind of differ within that climate justice lens? Well, I suppose my knowledge wouldn't differ very much, but in terms of my vertical axis, how would my power kind of change based on the role I take on, whether that be as a student, as an individual, or as or someone in a climate organization? So yeah, we'll give you a few minutes for that as well to kind of fill yourself in as the emojis. Feel free to pick any one of them to kind of fill you guys in. Thank you, Mia, for starting the timer. Yeah, and we'll come back and kind of look at it, discuss it, and we can talk about where we kind of fall, how we kind of feel as a group or as individuals on a global scale.
Wonderful. I love seeing some of these emojis popping up here. I see your tree sticky, Linda. Wonderful. So this was a crash course in Actors Map as one tool in many of the strategic foresight toolkit. And hopefully it gave you an opportunity to participate in this whiteboard space, to have some of these conversations. When the map is filled, and it's something that is evergreen, that can be ever changing, but take a moment. So look at the map that we have here right now, for example, in just the short amount of time that we had together, we were able to populate it with a lot of different actors, a lot of potential stakeholders, perhaps see where we would fit into it. So take a moment to reflect on this map as we see it and consider, are there actors with a high amount of knowledge, but with little power? Are those in power in this space well informed? Or are decisions being made without deeper understanding? And what are the potential disconnects in this, and how might they be bridged? You might see that there's quite a bit more in these other quadrants. It's a bit easier to think of actors, individuals, organizations in these quadrants. They have more time in the limelight, so to speak. You see them more often in the news. You talk about them more. But who are those who have little knowledge or little power? Or who are those who are lower on the power spectrum, and how might we engage them? Who are you in relation to this system? Are you at the center of decision making, or are you working from the margins? And what privileges or barriers exist in your current position? This is something that could be applied. These are questions that could be applied to all actors maps that are created. And ultimately to wonder, how do you want to show up in this space? So are you comfortable in your current role, or do you maybe want to shift how you're engaged in this system? And what insights are you uncovering? Are there relationships that need to be strengthened? Are there new actors that we maybe need to engage? Or do we need to present a few challenges? So really using this to understand a space, for example, something as broad as the climate justice space, but also trying to connect that to your individual life, to how you show up in your community and in these spaces. So just a final opportunity to review this map, to look at it, to reflect on it, and then passing it over again to Eleanor here as she brings us on some reflections on this exercise.
Thank you so much, Mia. Yeah, I think it's so important to consider where we fall within the system and like, looking forward in the future, because that is kind of why we want to emphasize this with the future, the foresight tools that we have, is kind of see where we want to go in the future and how we can, what actions we can take in order to get there. So, Mia, if you'd like to take us over to the mentee board, we're just going to kind of do some wrap-up final kind of reflections and seeing where we fall within it. So I'll wait for her to pull that up. But essentially, it's kind of asking where there might be any disconnects in the climate justice system and how might they be bridged. So this is an open-ended question, so feel free to make it as long as short as you want, or as personal as you want, or as personal as you'd like. Again, if you can't access the Miro board, feel free to message either one of us or drop it in the chat, and we'd be happy to put it into the mentee as ourselves. We'll give you about maybe 3-ish minutes to kind of let you guys filter in these responses. Or again, feel free to discuss in the chat, as we really want to emphasize that overall this session is meant to be interactive and discussion, like how to see where our opinion and perspectives lie on a global scale. Yeah, so I'll give you guys 2-ish, 3 minutes to kind of think about that.
And I've just dropped the Mentee link in the chat as well if you prefer to join on your device or your computer. So I love to see the answers coming in. I wonder, Eleanor, are there any that stand out to you as you see this, working as you are in the climate justice space, that really resonate?
Yeah, I think the part about relationships, and I really like the one of are all the actors speaking to each other on the map. I think that's so important, especially within the climate justice system. I recently attended another local conference for the centered around climate education, and the theme was actually called Game Changers. It was for secondary school students, or actually no, students from grades 6 to 12. So I think it's so important to have that community there, but beyond that, you can like being only in one quadrant or being only in that one ring, that not necessarily, I don't want to say it doesn't have that impact, but it might not necessarily have the impact that we're looking for. So being able to talk to each other, being able to reach different groups and different people who have different levels of impact. Yeah, definitely for sure what you mentioned in the chat, long-term commitments and time-limited programs can cause disconnects. So that's why we really want to being consistent and being curricular and holistic and intersectional in what we learn and how we understand the climate justice system. So for me, that's what really stands out, is the relationships and the community we have within the climate justice system, because it really is so important in the work that we're doing. What about you, Mia? Does anything stand out to you, especially being a strategist and understanding that?
Yeah, I think some of the things that really stand out for me here is this missing links between institutions, policies, or stakeholders. So it makes that connection of what are those missing links? What are those strategies that could address those missing links? What are the policies that we might need? I think that it's all of these disconnects that are being flagged shows the advantages of using, for example, strategic foresight tools in order to uncover some of these gaps in the system.
For sure. And yes, I think another one question that we like to kind of reflect on is based kind of going off of what we kind of talked about. And the last question is, what actions could you take to use the insights you gained here to work towards an equitable and sustainable future? So equitable meaning, again, going back to considering what we kind of define in the climate as a climate justice system in the very beginning. How do we get more equal based on like socio-economical, intergenerational factors? And that kind of inequity and inequality. How can we address that? Again, there's no right or wrong answer. There's obviously just a discussion to kind of get you guys thinking about the future and what we could do to kind of change either if we want to change like where we are in terms of the actors map, or in general kind of giving ideas about what we can do to work towards an equitable, sustainable future. So like similarly to before, we'll give you maybe 1 minute-ish, just because we're running a little bit low on time. We're gonna do a lightning round, so we're gonna do 1 minute. Just put any thoughts in there if you have, and again, anything you can drop in the chat, but we'll come back in a minute.
I love to see some of the pieces that are coming in here. I guess before we continue our lightning round, wondering, Eleanor, if there's anything here that stands out for you, that surprises you. There's lots of great ideas that are coming in.
For sure. I think one thing that really stands out to me, especially both on personal level and as an organization, is like integrating integrating sustainability within our personal lives. So kind of what we touched on earlier, who we are in relation to the system, but also how can we integrate what we learn and what we value into our everyday lives. So as a student, I'm gonna always be able to pursue or advocate for climate education, especially because of the way it's structured, because I don't have that elective or don't have that choice. But how can I integrate that sustainability mindset into what I want to pursue as a career? So for instance, one thing that's what I like to think about is something called like green collar jobs or green jobs. So that means having sustainability mindset within our own careers. So if we're building new buildings or building hubs or like education, how can we integrate our knowledge of our climate justice system and overall the system into what we're doing already? Yeah. There's so many great responses here. I wish I could talk about all of them and let you guys keep on discussing it a bit, but I think I'll let Mia switch back to our Miro to kind of do our little retro activity to kind of reflect on and look back on what we've learned today within this hour session. So I'll pass it back to her.
Wonderful, thank you. So this final step here, I will be sharing a Miro and we're going to continue our lightning round, recognizing where we are on the hour. But for those of you who are in the Miro board, I'm going to invite you over to our retroactive space. So I'm gonna call everyone to me. Again, I'm sharing screen just for those who are not able to join the Miro. Please feel free to drop it into the chat and I'd be happy to add it for you here. So lightning round, we're going to give everyone a minute for each of these questions. The first question we have is, as we wrap up this workshop, how are you feeling? Please feel free to copy and paste the emojis on this side here and drag them over to one of these little phones that we have, just to get a snapshot of how everyone is feeling after this quick crash course in how to map space using one of the Foresight tools available to us.
And In terms of duplicating it or copying it, you right click onto one of the emojis. Yeah, and then you can place it on one of these cute little phones here.
Oh, Tajala, I love that. Feeling strong. I will find a special emoji just for that. There we go. Can drop it right there.
Feeling empowered, I think, is another way. I think I really like that as well. That emoji. Yeah, do you think you have an emoji that you feel with right now and really resonate with?
Feeling quite grateful to be able to gather in this space with everyone. Oh, Alethea, Alethea, I see that the emoji is hiding. We see it peeking there. Oh, and we got a little curious. All right. So to continue on with our lightning round,